ashamed.
You're bound to face failures. You're bound to face really challenging times. But there's always a way for you to step out of it. I felt very ashamed of myself. I felt very low. I even had suicidal thoughts. My degree didn't matter. I was an engineering graduate. I was an engineer before I went into business, but that didn't matter to them because all they could see was a female figure.
If we had spoken to today's guest not that long ago, we would have heard the impressive story of a woman who built a very successful computer hardware business from scratch as a single mother in a male-dominated environment in Malaysia, overcoming so many barriers in a conservative society. But then it all went south. The business failed overnight, and Nadira Yusoff found herself in a very dark place. How does it feel to find yourself as a single mother of 6 children in a world where everything seems to be stacked against you? Where on the one side you put on a brave face because you don't want to worry your family, whilst on the other side you wonder how it would be if things would end there and then. Nadira very candidly talks about the loneliness she experienced when she found herself at rock bottom. And for the first time in our series, we hear about shame, something we all carry with us but are often not aware of. The shame we feel when the business fails because it feels we failed our customers, our employees, our investors, or our families. How do you come out of this? Nadira shares how she's using her engineering brain to structure and make sense of the situation and address the challenges one step at a time, and how she managed to come out of it the deepest low by focusing on a new business, Kiddo Care, Malaysia's first babysitting mobile platform. Please meet Nadira.
This is Naked by the Future Farm, where entrepreneurship is stripped to its vulnerable core. Brought to you by Vladi Meško-Brestinska and Nectarios Lolios.
And remember, subscribe, follow, and rate Naked to help share it with the world.
So Nadira, it's such a great pleasure to have you on Naked. So thanks for agreeing.
Thanks for having me.
How are you doing?
I am great. It's been good. It's been challenging, but good.
So we'll talk all about it, but let me put this into context. So looking at you now on the camera as we are recording this on the Zoom, it feels like I've seen you just yesterday, right? So we've met, what is it now, 3 or 4 years? I can't even recollect that we've met on our leadership trip. Yeah. So indeed. So we were at this leadership trip with I think we were like 50 women from all around the world, entrepreneurs, amazing group. But you stood out for me so strongly. So let me put this into context for our listeners, okay? So, and you tell me if I got something wrong, you have to just correct me, please. So at the moment, you are a founder of 7 businesses in total. Is it correct? 7? Is that the right number? About 7, okay. Mother of 6 beautiful children.
Bouncy. I can't say like they're beautiful.
Okay,
that's subjective.
I'm sure every mother or every parent would agree with that statement. The business that you kind of was major part of your journey, which you've been building for 18 years, was in what people would say men's domain. So you were building and assembling computers, and your company became, as I read it, I have it here, first local company in Malaysia to provide computer delivery to houses, even into the rural areas. I just felt it's important to say this to people so that we establish the, space you come from.
Yeah.
And you are now leading your tech startup. We'll get to how you've got there, but Kiddo Care, which is, providing a connection for parents with carers and babysitters.
Yeah.
And beyond all of this, you have been leading Girls in Tech Malaysia. You have been president of the Women Entrepreneurs Network Association and many, many others. So the list is long. And I was thinking where to start with you because there is so much. How is it for women in Malaysia to start a business like you did, which was in, tech, computers, assembling hardware? How was that experience?
Well, I guess, in the time when I started, that was, I think, about 23 years back, right? 23 years back, it's nothing like what it is today. I think now we have many more women in tech startups, and it's not foreign anymore for Malaysian women to come up with tech-based startups. But when I started 23 years ago, it was something that was, is unusual for women to be starting, especially in a hardware business, right? And when I started, it was that, and I thought, and at my point, it wasn't just about being technical, but it was also a struggle of, so I was very young. I was going into a hardware assembly manufacturing business, and to come up with a local brand, it was something unusual for the Malaysian market, especially, right? So there were many hurdles because it was being a woman in tech and building a brand.
I'm curious, just, and this might be interesting for a lot of the people who are listening, because we might not be so knowledgeable of the region. Nadiras, you have your, direct connection, your life connection to the region, so you might know. But does the religion and the geography, the region, also played role in some of those obstacles that you had on that journey at that point?
I must say, unfortunately, during that time, yes. So I had moments when, I've already started my business. I had some credentials, and yet, when I went for meetings, I had men asking me, "So who's behind you?" Things like that. And I would come out very straight and say, "Who's behind me? There's nobody behind me." And I would give them a lecture of, you sending your children, your girls to colleges and universities. Is this the kind of questions that you want them to face? Right? So I did have that. I experienced that firsthand. And it wasn't just that, because when I started my business and I was into my business, I was also a single mother. So there was this perception of women, willing to do just anything and everything to get projects and things like that. So there was also a whole lot of, issues of, undermining the women's ability. Not just that, there were also many, many pursuits of, sexual harassment, I can even say. And how they see you as, maybe just the face, but not the ones doing the work. So that was a real challenge, being, at that time young, being at that time very aggressive. So there were many notions among the men, because they thought that, I was just good for just the face. I was just the face, right? And I wouldn't know what I was talking about. My degree didn't matter. I was an engineering graduate. I was an engineer before I went into business. But that didn't matter to them because all they could see was a female figure, right? At one point, thinking maybe I should be one of the boys, one of the men, instead of being a woman. So I started being very aggressive like men. I speak like men. And then I decided this is not me. It's very difficult. I had to go out and join the cigar sessions and stuff like that. I didn't like it, right? It wasn't me. But I guess after a while, there were many more women who also came into the industry and started the business. And at that time, my product spoke for itself. The brand spoke for itself. We could do it. It took us a while, but eventually, I must say that, we changed that kind of perception that people had on us. But I must also say, maybe what we did also helped some other women after us to come in and.
I'm sure about that.
Yeah.
This is really, I think, something we can stay a little bit with, because ultimately, when you have to struggle so much to fight for your recognition and acceptance and credibility, right? How do you actually deal with this when you go back home in the evening? You're completely exhausted. You're a single mother. You have to look after your kids. Does this come with things like doubting yourself, thinking to throw in the towel, or because you sound so energetic? And having 6 physical children and 7 business children, right? It means there's a lot of kind of resilience there. But how do you get that strength to go, I'm going to ignore all this. I'm going to process that, and I'd keep fighting.
Well, I can't lie. I mean, many times I felt like, I should give up. Maybe I should just go and, get a job and do something more conforming, if I may say, at that time. But I think my blessing was that I did not have a choice. So I was the sole breadwinner for the family. I could not do that. I could not afford to. And I've invested so much into the business that, if I give up, then it would mean me giving up on everything that I have invested. So I didn't want that. I knew I could do it. It's just a matter of changing people's perception. But I knew at the very core, my business is all me. It wasn't so much of, if I stood there and just listened to, people trying to bring me down, it wasn't going to do me any good. I had to think of the investment that I've already made. I have to think of the family who's, being dependent on me. And I didn't have a choice.
I wonder, and you might, not confirm that, but I wonder whether being a parent, being a mother to your children played a role in you actually standing up there. I was just thinking, that because you have obviously I know about you that you are working, for community in the wider sense, but also for your own children as a role model. Did that play a role for your, in terms of your resilience?
Oh yes, of course. But sometimes that's also a challenge, right?
In what way?
So I knew I had no choice but to work in what I was doing, building the business and, persevering and things like that, because I was a sole breadwinner. At the very same time, I also wanted my children to see me as a woman who can achieve and do anything, right? That's not going to stop me. So even if I was a single mother, there are things that's going to come. So, what kind of example am I going to be showing my children, my girls, my boys, if I gave up? I didn't want to do that. I know I had to lead by example. So, yeah. But that didn't come with another, another moment of being guilty, because having to push through, there were a lot of sacrifices that I had to make, or rather they had to make. They couldn't get much of their mother when they were going out, because I had to work extra hard just to get that recognition, just to be recognized. So so that was that balance. I think it wasn't just my fight, but many mothers out there struggle to find that position of having to balance that. So there was a lot of guilt also that I had with my kids. But I turned that around because I figured, if I am going to ask for their sacrifice, I have to make it worthwhile. So I think, at this point, I'm pretty sure if they don't say it enough, but I think they're proud of me.
Wow.
I'm proud of the things that I can buy for them.
So you said, I wanted to be for them Nadira, a mom who can do and achieve anything. What that means for you. The reason why I asked, and Nadiras, I'm curious what you think about this too, in terms of that, even for myself, when you said it, Nadira, it resonated in terms of, I felt actually heaviness around it. I can do and achieve anything, because sometimes I feel that's the hard toll we put on ourselves. So I'm feeling like, I actually want to be okay, not to achieve everything, and being just so that's the piece where.
Right. Yeah. I tried. I failed many times too. I must say, and I don't like failures, but I embrace them. There were many times when I made wrong judgments, when I failed, when things didn't go my way. And I think my children clearly saw those moments too. There were times when we were hit very hard, right? There were times when we lost quite a lot, almost everything, and they had to struggle through it too. And picking up for me was tough, but they have always been, I guess, my encouragement, or I must say my end goal. So yeah, they know that, you're bound to face failures. You're bound to face really challenging times. But there's always a way for you to step out of it, right? And I also believe that, my family is my tribe. So my kids are a member of a very strong tribe. So they're always making sure that mommy's okay. My son would come to me and say, do you want coffee? What's wrong with you today? Did you have a good day? And they see this because they face failures all the time too, and they face challenges too. And I think that's where, they see their mom picking up. There are days when I cry and I would talk to them about it. There are days when they come in and see my face and, they just hold my hands and not say anything and just sit down in silence. So they know that, because at the end of the day, the next day you wake up, that's that choice that you make to change your situation. But I guess it's not easy to do it alone. I was very lucky because I do have my tribe. I do have my family, and they're my biggest, I guess, supporter to now.
You say it so casually. You wake up the next morning and you make a choice.
I make it sound
this is the thing. Yes. This is the thing we actually would like to dig in a little bit deeper into, right? Because what is it that actually gives you the strength or even the mindset to be able to wake up the next morning and go, you know what? Yesterday was yesterday, but today is going to be different. And maybe it's also worth kind of moving away a little bit from, you built this amazing business. It was very successful, but, and there is a but here, that business ended up no longer being successful, right? So the work of 17, 18 years of your life, or however long it took, right? At some point you had to face the fact that it didn't go well, right? Would you mind sharing a little bit more about how this manifested itself?
Okay. So you mentioned just now, how do I made it sound very casual. So how do you actually, wake up and see that? So, there's this saying, you fake it until you make it.
Yeah.
Right? And my mantra has always been, you believe in what you believe. So you just have to believe. And I guess in this sense, I think I am a Muslim. So, being a Muslim, we go back to faith. And I think that helped me. It has always been having faith. But I guess, everyone should have faith, whether in God or in something. You should believe that there is always the light at the end of the tunnel. I think on that very basis, I am a very positive person. I have always been very positive. I guess, I've always been like that throughout my even young days. Even at the point when I'm at the lowest, I would try to find that end light. I would search my soul and find that, because I know that there is always a chance for you to make things better. It will take time, it will take struggle, but things can be better. There is no way that you can't make things better. So I always believe in that. So every day I would wake up and tell myself, I would visualize the things that I want, and I would put them, and I just make sure that I believe that I will achieve that. I will see myself doing what I want to get. And that's the mantra that I have. I always believe in that, that energy has to come from you, and that belief will actually drive that sense of energy. And that's how I wake up every morning and just keep going, no matter how difficult. So I have been through some very, very challenging times when, my business just hit a real big rock, and, we weren't prepared for it, and it just went down. And on top of that, I lost my marriage, and many things just happened at one time. That was tough. Again, I must say that I had thoughts of even, I even had suicidal thoughts at one point, and then it struck me, I have always been very positive, and my suicidal thought was all about, if I die, at least my kids will get my insurance
Make it
money.
easier.
But then I realized that if I die and I give them my insurance money, and they're going to be spending it, and then they don't know what to do. So I must be around, right? So I was telling myself, no, I must be around, and I have to turn this around. And there's definitely something that I can do to turn things around. If at that point of time, on that day, we can't eat McDonald's, I'm sure we can eat just plain rice. That was the thinking that I had, So there was a choice, and we all had to make the choice. My kids had to make the choice. They were going to a private school, and they had to leave, and they were not in school for a couple of months because we didn't know what to do. So they had to make that sacrifice also, but they knew, that things are going to get better. So they struggled with me. We went through a very difficult times together. But I'll always tell them, like I tell myself, have something that you truly believe in, and keep telling yourself, keep believing in that belief, and it will happen, because it will drive you, one step further, and will take you out from where you are. So that's how I actually did it. I was at that very low times when I was very lonely, apart from my children. But of course, even though I talk to them, I can't really tell them how I was feeling. I had to also make sure that I exude some kind of a confidence for them, because I needed them to be okay. And Vladi, I think that was the toughest thing to do, to put on that face. And it kills you inside, because at the end of the day, you feel like, all your strength is just gone already.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a weak foundation, no matter how, tall or big that wall you build, it's bound to break, right? So again, all I had was really my faith. That was it. That was all I had. I had to just do a lot of. I was watching a lot of this what do you call that, motivational videos, and reading my Quran, and I went back to that. That was all I had, and trying to find somebody who could help you out of it. In the beginning, it was very tough because I was in a position where I felt very ashamed of myself. I felt very low because there was so much noise around me, and people were talking and making judgment. And it was funny because, it's not that I have not gone through those kind of challenges building my business. I always had people talking behind my back, always had people, trying to, pull me down. But I guess when you're at your lowest, it just amplifies itself, right?
Yeah.
And then you just have to take a moment. So when I was at my lowest, I remembered me taking that moment to just go through that whole process of all my fears, right? And then I realized if I compartmentalize all the fears, if they don't come in one go, I knew I could overcome that. Right? I could overcome what people were saying about me because I've gone through that already. I could.
So you're broken down nearly.
Yeah. So I
can
just
visualize
mapped it out. I tried to put myself in that position where, I have to deal with one thing at one time.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Right? Because before that, I just lumped everything together and I just felt suffocated. That's it.
Yeah.
So I had to do that, and I guess being an engineer by training, I actually mapped it out.
That's beautiful, actually. But it's funny because you know what? I now feel lighter. As we went with you through the story, I so felt the pressure and the overwhelming feeling, right? Of like, you don't even know where to start and it just adds up. And as you said, and you still have to keep going because primarily of your children, right?
And that's
not
the toughest,
even for
that's
yourself.
the toughest, yeah.
You mentioned quite a lot of things that we've heard from other founders so far. You mentioned the loneliness, you mentioned the lack of perspective, but also the identity piece. But you also mentioned one thing we actually haven't discussed a lot about, which is shame. And it's really interesting because that concept of shame that you can apply to so many different aspects of your life, right? That we all carry with us without even knowing about, right, is a really, really tricky one to unpack because it comes with so much baggage from our upbringing. It comes with the societal pressures, right? You said so many things that individually would be really difficult to deal with, right? You very casually, again, mentioned your marriage fell apart, right? Amidst all the hassle about losing the business and having to deal with the kids, and then having to look inside and feeling ashamed for being responsible for this, because that's what we do, right? And you realize that all the external factors don't matter. It's all my fault. It's such a terrible feeling. And the reason I'm talking about, I went through this, right? I went through this when my relationship of 17 years ended, and it was really hard, but also then when I left my business and all that. And it's, for me, it's just fascinating to hear how you just turn to your faith and get so much strength out of this. But the one thing that you haven't mentioned, and I'm curious if you haven't mentioned it because it wasn't there, was friends, confidants, mentors, people in your network. Maybe there were only a few left because everybody else was talking around your back, but were there people that you can confide in that would become a counselor or a shoulder?
It wasn't until I got myself out of it. Again, because I was engulfed with that shame, right? So when you're in that position where, you just keep blaming yourself for a whole lot of things, and then you have shame around you, and it becomes bigger. So I couldn't bring myself to speak to anyone. Number one, I had trust issues, right? I didn't know who I could trust. I didn't know who would be able to speak to me without making judgments. So I think anyone in that position would probably feel that way, going to someone, you would always feel, whether this person is really going to help me or take time to listen, or are they going to listen to me and after that, laugh at the condition that I am. So I always had that in my head, and after a while, right? So after I managed to, again, compartmentalize all these fears that I have surrounding me, and I figured out what are the kind of things that I wanted to overcome. And then I realized that, as I was sitting there thinking that people were going to judge me, I was judging them too. I didn't allow myself to actually outreach to someone. So it took me a while. So that's why I guess it became so lonely, because of that fear of outreaching to someone. So it was a real struggle for me to actually go out and outreach to people. But I had a close circle of friends who actually didn't even know that I was going through that situation that I was going through. Because I didn't.
How come?
I
didn't share?
No, I didn't share. Again, I was so afraid of and I didn't know who I could trust anymore. So that was my problem, and I didn't want people to judge me, and I also didn't want people to feel bad for me or to feel sorry for me, right? But I actually went and looked for others who needed help. So I was somebody who needed help, but I went to look for others who needed help. And then I realized that I was not alone, that there were so many other people who went through the same situation, needed help. And then I realized, once you realize that you're not alone in this, that other people struggle too, sometimes you will see that other people struggle even more than you, right? And yeah, then I started becoming very humble. And then I started to pick myself up and go out to meet people, because I knew I couldn't do it alone. If that one person that I didn't reach out to and tried to help at whatever level capacity that I could, that person will never be able to come out from where she was. And then I also realized that I will not be able to, again, come out from my shell if I don't outreach to somebody who can try to at least help me. Because that was what I was doing to another person. I was trying to help. I didn't know whether I had the best help, but I tried. And then I started to speak to, my close friends and things like that. So I learned a very valuable lesson at that time. I learned to, never to judge, and to start trusting people.
We had few founders sharing with us that one of the mechanisms they reached out for in those moments was the neutral party. So, you can say coach, or psychologist, therapist. Is that a theme, is that an option topic in your circle, in your environment where you live at all?
So when I was struggling, right, my biggest business at that time hit a wall, and it felt really hard. And I was trying to pick up myself. That's when I started my new venture. I started
we heard this before.
Yeah, so many people were telling me, you're starting at a very, unusual time. But I said, that's okay. I needed a distraction. I needed to, build myself. So I knew that, I wanted to separate myself from the same industry, and I wanted to try something new. I needed to kind of revive myself, or plant, another seed and grow somewhere else. So I went into this new startup kind of business, because my business before this was very traditional and things like that, so it's different. And then I also realized that there were other challenges that I didn't think that I would find in a new industry. So yeah, in business wise, I did, went to meet with people I didn't know at first, and I seek their help in terms of, trying to learn the business side. It was a lot of relearning also. So it was an experience, because coming in as a businesswoman with 20 over years experience, right? And then I suddenly realized that, hey, there's so much more that I don't know. And I have a mentor who's like 30s. And, I'm so much older. So yeah, from a business angle, I went and find myself some mentors and coaches. On the personal side, I went to, I had my friends, very close friends. But what's very interesting are those people whom I helped. We actually now form a really close group connection, right? Because we kind of supported each other throughout that journey, going out from where we were. So that group kind of grew. So we became confidants to each other.
Is there something in your new business that you've done differently based on your experience?
Oh, yeah.
Not from a business perspective, not from an industry perspective, but the people you surround yourself with, or whatever it may be. If I may share something that I hear that is very different, is that when you talk about your old business, it's always I, Nadira. But when you talk about kiddo care, it's always about we do this and we do that.
Yes.
Right? Is it because you have a different kind of team around you that has a different weight and a different say, or is this just a mindset that you're kind of displaying?
I think it has. I think it's kind of both. You see, when I was building my businesses last time, all I wanted was to build a business. I wanted to build a big brand. I wanted to build an empire of technology businesses. It was always me. I wanted this. I wanted that. And then I guess going through those stumbling blocks in life also made me realize that it wasn't, the power does not sit in me or the brand, because I can hit that block anytime, right? As I was building this business, I knew at the root of it all, it has always been about the community, right? And that's why it is the success of Kiddo Care right now. We're fairly new in the business. We're about 2 years old. But I must say that we're moving very fast. We're skilled very fast. And it wasn't about me. It was the power of the community. It's that power of the babysitters, there are many of them. And the power of our consumers, again, many of them. and my team is completely driven by that community. You see, last time, we were pushing products. It was always about selling products, which is great because we do have products also. But that's how we wanted to scale. But now, every time we talk about scaling, we talk about, all right, so how can we create better conditions for people? How can we make sure that our babysitters can earn more? How can we make sure that, they can have better quality of lives? So that concept of if you make others rich, you become richer. So if they make them better, naturally you become better. So this is how we feel the business is very different from how we used to grow business, or I grew business last time. And it's so much more, passion in building this business for the fact that you see people's lives
visible.
Change. Yeah, it's just so satisfying. So yeah.
Feels like rebooted Nadira, really. I mean, and I don't know whether it's through kiddo care or through that journey, and kiddo care is one of that step, right, on that journey. When you look at yourself today, who is Nadira?
I guess, I just want to do good. That's me. I just want to do as much good as I can for as long as I can. In whatever way that I can touch people's life, and if I can change it for, a little better, I want to do that. And I think that's my life goal at the moment.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you.
It was so lovely to see her again. This moment when because literally it was like 4 years, I think, that we haven't seen each other. And I remember already then she was really standing out of the crowd and with this strength and, just how she kind of, there's power.
A lot of energy.
Yeah, a lot of energy.
You kind of engage with people on an intellectual level, but in some conversations, it kind of hits you in the gut.
Oh, very much.
And when Nadira was talking about the moment where she felt like, if I die, my kids will get the health insurance or the life insurance, I got goosebumps and I got really emotional. I mean, it really shook me because it's something of an impasse, right? When you hit that wall and you go, probably the best thing for everybody would be if I'm no longer around. That was, wow, right? Yeah. But also just that being comfortable saying these things. I really value that conversation.
Yeah. I've had a feeling, and I shared it on the podcast, right? When she moved from there towards like, okay, how did I even start to kind of break this down? And I did literally feel the lightness coming in because her engineering mind resonates so much. So, I have those, and my friends know, like, I have those big posters around the walls, right? And when I'm in a DIB, I map out. So I love all of those tools that just helps you to, like do the mind mapping and indeed the lightness around seeing, where you can start and breaking them into small pieces. I think it's such a valuable, I don't think it's an advice, it's just a way how some of us can approach problem solving. And indeed, it does resonate with me, might with some of our listeners. There might be other people who don't work with that, but it was a strong one for me.
I tend to break things down as well, but the only filter I apply is what I can control and what I cannot control.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
And because if I can objectively see that this is something that is out of my control, it actually helps me not to worry about this because I depend on other things. But if it's something that I can control, this is where step by step, how do you eat the elephant? Bite by bite, right?
Yeah.
And that is something that has helped me out of difficult situations. And you can phrase it any way you want. We all have I think a lot of us have tools or find ways to actually just start addressing the things that are easier to address and little by little work towards something bigger.
Yeah, I will put this into our resources, and I think we might have already references in some of the previous resources and episodes, but the Designing Your Life book and methodology by Stanford guys actually talks very quite deep about this approach of how do you gain a perspective and understand where you can actually impact things, right? And when you cannot, take a step back and disconnect, and as you said, it can cut you some slack and again, like hopefully some space and perspective. This piece around when we asked Nadira what was there for her, so, and you mentioned it, that it was fascinating to see how big a role a faith can play in people's lives. So that was a big wow for me.
I'm surprised that it hasn't come up before.
Maybe it's shameful
such an important
talk about shame.
I don't know, but usually in this context, with kind of the whole work that Brené Brown has done and everything else,
Sure.
you would have thought that it's something it would have come up before, but it hasn't. And I'm grateful that it has in our first season, so that we can put it on the table as something that people can read about. Maybe discovering some of the people who actually do some research.
Yeah, one more thing that I want to talk to you about, and again, this has came up again in our conversation, is that what a big role a new venture can play in rebooting somebody. Like, it's this, it was the energy that came through, even through the Zoom, that you could see. And she was saying, like, I needed to plant the seed in a completely different garden, right? Like, I needed to go to a different industry and brush it off everything. And the dedication that you put into building that new venture, again, I think powerful. In the back of my mind, I was thinking, is there a risk that we get also connected to it, and everything now is focused on building that new venture and is the new hope? So we talked about it a little bit with Nadira, but don't know, question mark. Depends, I believe, on the level of self-awareness that you develop, right? Maybe, which might be higher after all of that experience. But seems that this, for a lot of the serial entrepreneurs and, entrepreneurial kind of mindset that we have, and it's deep there in you, building a new business, new venture plays an important role, or it's an option for many people, how to build a new skin, clean up, cleanse, reboot.
It's a distraction, but it's meaningful, I get it. I totally get it. Well, it's a bit of, how do you get over the loss of a pet? You get a new puppy, there is a bit of that. But at the same time, it helps you also if you're in this process of digesting.
Yeah.
And if you're a doer, rather than kind of intellectualizing it, you actually try to do things differently. And maybe you don't, because we also had cases where people just make the same mistakes, right? But
I would go into whether there is work required while doing so, and exactly what you said, whether it can sometimes be a trap that we go and, it might be a place to, help heal, but it might be also a place of escape. And it's hard for me. So obviously don't really know about Nadira, and, again, maybe a place to continue a conversation, but it was something that was interesting for me to see and seeing it as a pattern, really. And whether we are self-aware or not, why we're doing that.
You've been listening to Naked by The Future Farm, where entrepreneurship is stripped to its vulnerable core. To learn more about our work, sign up to our newsletter or visit thefuturefarm.co, where you can also apply to be a Naked guest. Naked is produced by Dan Turgel, coordinating producer Alena Zamirova, and edited by Catherine Dworke.
And remember to subscribe, follow, and rate Naked to help us share it with the world.